Hey guys, welcome to the Desert Shield Sniper. Today I want to talk about why nines are the new tens. Now, I find that, I'm now more accepting to chase nines more than tens. Now, first of all, reason being is a practical one, costs. In recent months, I've noticed that the tens cost a lot more than nines. And let's disregard new and old labels because I've seen old labels still sell for a very, very big premium. Okay, so as a collector, okay, I'm speaking on behalf of as a collector and not a flipper or investor. How I look at the difference between a 9 and 10, I think is very minimal. I think the condition between a 9 and 10 is, nowadays is very, very minimal. People complain about how often we see a lot of flaws with PSA 10s. And if you look at the two examples here, you know, by eye appeal, I actually find the PSA 9 old label more centered than the PSA 10. I don't know if you can actually see the difference here through my camera phone, but I definitely feel that. And sometimes I've seen some tens, and I think I've spoken about this before. There's a 10 on eBay now where the back left corner has this big ding and paper loss. So often, I I would really wish that buying a 10 would be like, okay, I'm going for a 10 and I don't need to check the condition of the card because it's a PSA 10 and it's perfect. But that's not the case. And that is why often I find myself happier with the PSA 9 because the card looks better. And also to do with the fact that I'm a collector and not a flipper. And sure, I may sell the cards or the collection one day, but not anytime soon. I may sell doubles, but I'm not buying a card basically thinking about resale value. I mean, that's something down the road, but not for the short distant future, right? So I find myself more and more comfortable buying nines because it allows me to have more budget to buy other cards. I collect other cards as well, so if I spent, I mean, the Desert Shield is a big set, 792 cards. I know for most collectors, it's most ideal to have a whole set in PSA 10, but then again, is it practical? You know, I think nowadays, even like a lot of the commons at PSA 10 will cost you about $100, and this is not even counting shipping fees. So let's not talk about the big cards. Let's just say the whole set were commons. That itself will cost about close to $80,000, and that's a lot of money. However, if you're willing to take one grade lower at a PSA 9, I'm pretty sure that cost can be reduced by at least half. Okay. And once again, yes, I know there are big cards that cost a lot of money, like the Chipper Jones, the Nolan Ryan, etc., etc., etc. But I'm just saying, in terms of a cost um, perspective, how the nines is much more cost effective when you're trying to complete your Desert Shield set. The second thing is being really practical is that sometimes we have these tens that don't look that good. And we try to tell ourselves, well, it's PSA 10. But deep inside, we know the 9 looks a little better. And as a collector, I don't really want to look at a card based on the label. I want to look at the card and evaluate the card by how it looks, by the eye appeal. So, I mean, unless you're holding on to what's like what you think maybe the next 52 Mano, how important is it that you have a PSA 10, especially with a set like the Desert Shield? Um, I feel that the new grading guidelines is what is making these 10s cost so much because, first of all, if there are still a lot of packs or boxes out there, people aren't ripping them because they're very valuable. So we're not going to see a lot of new cards enter the market. And I'm sure there's a lot of raw cards out there, but even with the raw cards, a lot of them are not in good shape. And so certain cards, like for example, like the Cal Ripken um, record breaker that only has 2 PSA 10s, you're not going to see 10 or 20 PSA 10s pop up in the next couple of years. At best, maybe just a handful, and that's being optimistic where people are starting to submit their raw cards and they've been in really, really good shape since 1991 or whenever they rip their packs. So with that said, all of a sudden the PSA 10 population looks very, very attractive for investors. Now, mind you, as the value of the 10s go up, that will pull up the 9s as well. However, there's a lot more 9s. So at this moment, the 9s don't look like, they're very rare. And thus, that's why a lot of the pricing on the 9 is actually very attractive. However, in the long run, we will see, because of the fact that people are not able to chase the 10s, that the 9 will be in very high demand. And I do see that we won't be able to see PSA 9s for under $100 very, very shortly. We can still see that now with common cards, but I think very soon you'll see very like unknown common players go for like $100 or $200 at a PSA 9. And this all has to do with the backstory of the set, and most of you already know that there's only 6,818 of each players printed, and most people believe that less than half still exist. Although I'm kind of skeptical about that number because I do see a lot of raw cards out there, and I've heard of certain sellers that are holding a lot of raw cards as well. But regardless, the 6,818 number should be quite accurate. And even if the 6,818 number is accurate and that's how much is in the market, that's still not a lot. And so this set is, there's no question that this set has a lot of value. If we compare, I mean, we can't really compare it to the rest of late 80s and early 90s junk wax because of the fact that it was so heavily overprinted. But if we compare it to like an older vintage set, let's just say, for example, 56 Topps, which by the way has a bigger print run than Desert Shield, I can assure you that the PSA majority of the cards, and I'm not talking about the big cards, at PSA 9 are all over $200. You won't be able to find a PSA 9 56 Topps common player for less than $200. So I think that's the thing with the current situation with Desert Shield cards. It's undervalued. And as a lot of the collectors that collected cards in the 80s and 90s and now are in their 40s and 50s, like myself, are going back into collecting and realizing how short printed or how rare these cards really are, they will start to chase for the higher grades. But what will happen when they realize that certain cards only has a certain handful of PSA 10s? They'll start chasing PSA 9s. And that is why I think the 9s are the new 10s, because a few years ago, like pre-COVID, I still remember a lot of 10s still selling for a pretty attractive price. And, you know, smart collectors started to buy in at that time. And obviously, I think their investment has given them a pretty good return. So now I think that the chance has come, but it's not with the PSA 10s because they're so expensive, but it's with the PSA 9s. So that is why I think the 9s are the new 10s. So that's just my opinion. And like I said in my previous video, I'm not an expert. I'm just a collector. I started collecting a few years ago, but I'm checking out Desert Shield cards on a day-to-day basis online, and I've noticed, I'm noticing the prices and how rapidly the prices are increasing, and also which cards are in high demand, simply by just observing the auctions and so forth. So that's just my opinion, but if you don't agree or you have a different opinion, please share it with me. I would love to hear what you think. Perhaps you think that it's better to invest in a 10 because the 10s will just skyrocket in price, and meanwhile the 9s will kind of stay dormant. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know. And if you like to see more videos about Desert Shield cards, please like and subscribe and leave me a comment below.